Okay, Mr. Biddulph, thank you very, very much for joining me today. So you are the author of License to Cook, the book, and the blog, James Bond Food. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for having me, and give me this opportunity to talk about all things food related in the world of Bond.
Yes. The world of James Bond food might be unfamiliar to some listeners. So before we get right into it, would you like to give us a background of why?
Well, it's if you read the Bond novels by Ian Fleming, you're reading away. There's the adventure, there's the excitement, there's the romance, there's the villains. There's also the food. You're reading away. It isn't. You don't have to read many pages before there's some sort of food reference, and we find out in the course of the series of books about James Bond's tastes, the sort of food that his opponents, the villains, eat, and this stems from Ian Fleming himself. He was perhaps not so much of a cook himself, but he enjoyed food. Though he tended to have a fairly limited repertoire when it came to the sort of food that he ate, but he had an interest in food, and he wanted to make these the novels more interesting. And yes, he said he wanted to. He stated that he wanted to stimulate the reader right through to the reader's taste buds, and so that so yes, there's descriptions of food in quite some detail, and those descriptions are detailed enough for me to. And anyone else reading the books to recreate the food of the Bond books to some authenticity. So you can read the books, you can and you can make the food for a time. You can pretend you're James Bond, at least in the sort of food he eats.
I must admit, I've used your book and your blog many, many times for the recreation of recipes. I absolutely have several favorites that I keep going back to. Could I ask, what are your favorites that have come up in the books that you've recreated?
Oh, yes. I mean, I do. There are some recipes I go back to myself, and I do actually look at my cookbook and use my cookbook because just to remind myself of the details. I love the stew that James Bond eats from Russia Love at the gypsy camp.
The mutton ragout. That is also one of my favorites.
Yes.
I lived in Turkey for 7 years, and yours is still the best explanation of how to cook that dish.
Oh, excellent! Yes. Well, but yes, I mean, I do look for authenticity, and when I recreate a recipe or a food item, I look to contemporary sources, contemporary cookbooks, articles, in order to give me an idea, really, of the flavors and the way that things were cooked, and with that ragu, that yes, I managed to get some very nice details dating to the 1950s, which I think gives it a bit of authenticity. And yes, I'm glad you like that as well. Yeah, there are others. I've got just reaching over for a copy of the cookbook myself, which the canal de brochet, the pike dumplings, which Bond mentions Fleming mentions in Goldfinger. We don't actually see Bond, or it's not described that Bond actually eats these things, but he dreams wistfully of a meal of these pike dumplings on the eating them on the banks of the Loire in France, and yeah, so I recreated that, and so there's plenty. It's in a way you're. The beauty of recreating the food of the Bond books is you're recreating what Bond is eating and you're recreating Bond's world, but you're also recreating the world around him, and there's sort of cultural history there as well, which is the thing I absolutely love. And what was it like to eat in France in the 1950s or in 1950s America. Or Jamaican or any other place, and it's through this that I'm I can we can try to experience the sort of things that Fleming is describing, and that's what I'm really trying to capture.
Yeah, it conjures up that world wonderfully. And I think you might have commented elsewhere that for a lot of people in the UK reading at the time, food rationing was certainly in recent memory, if not still ongoing at the publication of some of the earlier books. So to have this window into other places and other worlds of food might have hit very differently then.
Oh yes, almost certainly. Yes, when Casino Royale was published in 1953, rationing was still on certain items was still ongoing, and eggs were not taken off rationing fully until I think 1954. And what do we have in the first book? Bond eating masses of eggs in the sauces or in the scrambled eggs, and this must have been absolute paradise. Reading it must have been and the food is as exotic as the locations. For these readers, it must have seemed like a really sophisticated world, and through Bond, readers could try to have a little bit of sophistication, a little bit of color, really, in their palates. And of course, Fleming describes foods which which now are staples of at least in Britain of staple dishes. Things like spaghetti bolognese, which Bond dreamed again. He's at Shrublands Health Farm in Thunderball, and he's been put on a strict diet regimen of thin vegetable soups and dandelion tea, and all we can think about is a big plate of spaghetti bolognese with lots of garlic and Chianti, washed down with Chianti, and now a spaghetti bolognese is of course, Fleming was writing as it was an Italian dish, but now of course it's become anglicized, and it's become part of cultures around the world as well. It's a standard student dish. You go to a student household, and what are they making? They're making spaghetti bolognese. These are the things that was the height of sophistication. I mean, the first spaghetti houses were opening at in London and elsewhere around that time as well. So in a way, Fleming caught the zeitgeist. He was catching the sort of the trends really right at the beginning, right at the dawn of these opening up of tastes and flavors and foods and culture around the world. And this is the incredible thing. You're sort of witnessing, reading upon books, you're sort of witnessing a sort of dawn really of change of new tastes.
It's an interesting window into that time. I'm curious, how did you first get into Fleming yourself?
Like lots of people, my first experience of James Bond was through the films. I think I must have been quite young at the time, in the 7 or 8 or something of that order. And one of my earliest memories was watching Goldfinger. I don't remember the whole film. I don't have memory of watching the whole film. It's just that there are certain bits. The raid on Fort Knox had always stuck in. That must have had a big impression on me when I was very young, and it stayed with me. And the Spy Who Loved Me, the film, I remember the Egypt scenes, Egyptian scenes, and sometimes they get a bit conflated when I think about them with the Pink Panther films. I think there's a sort of type of film, a sort of globe-trotting sort of type of film in the 60s and 70s, which I think they were very much it was all about adventure, and they're very much stick in the mind, I think. Anyway,
they both have the actor Burt Kwok.
They do indeed. Perhaps he was the sort of connecting thing at anyway. And the so I had awareness of James Bond, and my grandparents had some of the books in their bookshelf, and so when I visit my grandparents' house, books would be there, and I just look at the covers, and these are the book club editions, and with their wonderful covers. they had The Spy Loved Me and On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and I'd look at them and quite, linking them to the films. I knew they related to the films, and anyway, eventually I read them, and from that, I was probably about 10 or something, 10 or 11, and I was absolutely hooked, and I then proceeded to read as many, all the books after that, and so yes, and. So I've grown up so I've really grown up with James Bond, and I was introduced introduced myself rather to the books at an early age. I think I've always liked to look at the context of these things, of the books, but also the films. I've always, in a way that sort of reflects my background as an archaeologist. That's my job. I mean, I'm an archaeologist, and that reflects my interest in history, interest in the past, interest in culture and changing culture. And I think, I read things and I'm fascinated by of course, reading when I read them, these books were set in the past. It was about a world that had gone, and I suppose there must be that sort of fascination, and I want to know more about the background, about the context of James Bond's world. And so yes, I've been over the years. I've been finding out more. I found out more and more about Ian Fleming and James Bond, and yeah, so I became quite a aficionado, I suppose, after that.
And at some point, you started a blog.
Yes, well, that came later. Yes. The another interest of mine was food. I mean, my again, from an early age, I was always in the kitchen cooking, and my mother was a very good cook, and she'd make dinners, but I'd help where I can. Anyway, so I grew up knowing about food. I knew how to cook, basically, and so reading these books, there's lots of food which I was things I read. When I was younger, I read some of these food items, and I had absolutely no idea what they were. There's this like the quenelle de brochet, the punk dumplings. I didn't know they were punk dumplings when I read about that, but it sounded so exotic. Anyway, and so yes, I suppose I was always keen to know what these things were, but of course much later when people were talking about the food and drink of Bond, well, then nobody was really talking about the food. That was it. It was all about the drinks. It was all about the cocktails. All about the wine, the champagne, and so much later on, when I was more recently, I suppose, I realised there was a big gap in the market.
Yeah,
and absolutely nobody was talking about food. And I thought, well, I like food, and I was interested in learning the background about these things, finding out about what some of these more intriguing things were. And so I decided to write a cookbook. So the cookbook came first, and that was published. And then several years passed, and I thought, well, I'm still doing these recipes, but I'm not putting them in the book. So let's just put them on let's just put a website, and continue this. And the more and I suppose I did have an ulterior motive. The more recipes I put up on the website, then eventually I'll have another stack of recipes I can then make into a second edition of the book. So that's why. So basically, yes, I've got to that point where I think, yes, we've got enough for another book and a bigger book as well. So.
Fantastic. And I think I remember you writing that Ian Fleming talks about 70 different dishes in his 14 books. Is that right?
Yeah, I think I find more than that, actually, thinking about it. It's hard when you're counting the dishes, it's hard to quite know when you quite what counts as a separate item, or what to count as one, really. I mean, when it's a composite dish, do you count the ingredients as individually, or do you or composite meal? And so I think there's several ways one can probably add up all the meals. But if you just have food references alone, then you're actually probably way over 100.
Oh wow! Yeah.
Food references.
I'm thinking the flake and lemonade in On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Oh, yes,
include that, and
yes, well, that's right. That's right. I mean, yes, do include the flake lemonade and the lemonade. Incidentally, I was at a beach. It's gone out of my head now. The Salcombe Beach. That's it. Which is in Devon, if I remember correctly. And that's not mentioned. Salcombe Beach isn't mentioned in On Majesty's Secret Service, but that's where the young Ian Fleming went. And I imagine that's what he was thinking of when he was writing that passage in On Majesty's Secret Service about the buckets and spades and the sand in the sandwiches, and the flake in the lemonade. So I made sure I bought a flake and a little bottle of lemonade to take with me to Salcombe Beach. so yeah, I mean these are small things, but they sort of puts me in Bond's shoes for once.
Yeah.
There's singers, there's absolutely no chance I'm going to end up playing James Bond. At least I can eat his food. So
I found that when I go back and read the books again after cooking the recipes, it really deepens the enjoyment. It triggers the memory of that happy dish.
Yeah, exactly. And we get to find out what Bond thinks about these food items. He thinks, it's the best thing he's ever tasted. You can cut, the beef with a knife, with a fork rather, or things like that, and you can start to appreciate that. So yes, and although Ian Fleming himself, given the chance, he'd probably just live off a diet of scrambled eggs. He did experience these foods, and we can see that in the writing. It's fun anyway. It's fun to do this.
And it's interesting because we're focusing now on Ian Fleming, but you have gone beyond to things like the movies and the John Gardner books and so on.
Yes, I mean I suppose I was starting to run out of dishes and food items in the Fleming books, and so I've diversified into the Gardner things. And the Gardner novels and other continuation novels. What I find about the continuation novels is that the food is, it's all very serviceable, but it's a sort of parody of the food. It's almost a bit too grand. It's almost a bit too sophisticated. It's almost a little bit too impossible. Whereas the food in Fleming was is actually more basic than that. It's not completely highfalutin sort of French dishes. It's something a little bit more basic. But I suppose, having said that, there's a sort of sophistication inflation. Whereas in the 50s, as we're talking about, spaghetti bolognese, béarnaise sauce was absolutely, might have been, quite impossible for others to imagine. But this is, there's absolutely no way some of these readers might have been able to have these things. And I suppose you have to account for that yes, now of course everyone eats curries or spaghetti bolognese, and so you have to then raise the bar a little bit in the continuation novels.
Similar to the gadget inflation for some of the films where they just have to become bigger and better. And
yeah, exactly. Yes. So yes, that's interesting. And when Anthony Horowitz's new Bond novel comes out, then I shall be scanning the pages for food in order to, and of course, got the other new series of novels by Kim Sherwood, haven't we? So yes, there's going to be one thing that's great about the continuation novels is that they keep me in recipes. But yes, and also the films. We don't really tend to think about the films as having much in the way of food. Yes, again, drink is emphasised. We know the martini shaken as I said, but when I didn't have any recipes inspired by the films in the License to Cook.
Mm.
But when you look at these the films a little bit more carefully, you actually do see quite a lot of food, often very much in the background, and we don't actually see the characters eat very much, which is probably just as well. I never think it looks good to see anyone eat it. It's not the most sort of pretty side, but it's but yeah, there's food. I mean, for instance, virtually every film will have a bowl of fruit somewhere in the film, and right through to the most recent film. There's always look out for the bowl of fruit. There'll be a bowl of fruit, and I might perhaps there's a parlor game in there somewhere, but fruit bowl spotting, and if not that, there's perhaps a reference to food in the dialogue. I mean, borscht, for instance, is mentioned in Living Daylights, and in Goldeneye, borscht for brains. And so, well, let's do borscht then. But there's other things. I mean, we actually do see food sometimes, and apart from the food, again, often quite spectacular. And of course, we'll never forget that in Octopussy, the sheep's head.
Yes, you cooked that, right?
Yes, it was on my to-do list for a long time, and a sheep's head is something that you can't just can't just buy in the supermarket, at least in Britain anyway. And so I was, so that's one reason why I hadn't done it until very recently. And that also is that the thought of cooking a sheep's head was, I mean, I'm pretty adventurous food-wise, but I think I did draw the line at that for some reason for a long time. But then I thought, well, I've got to do it. And of course, these days there's online suppliers of anything. You can just about get anything, and sheep's head, or in fact a lamb's head, was no problem. So I cooked that and looked at how it might, saw what it looked like and tried to recreate what I thought it had. It looked like it had a sort of glaze on top, and it was sitting on a bed of rice, and there was some sort of green salady stuff on the back and behind. So yeah, I did that, and actually it was very nice. I mean, well, at least the bits the bits I ate, I didn't completely dig in, I have to say.
Okay.
But the cheeks were quite nice actually. But yes, it was. I think it's once in a lifetime thing. I don't think I'll do it.
It's not every Saturday night.
No, it's not going to be one of the recipes I keep on going back to. And it was, I suppose, probably much to the reader's relief. It was a bit too late for the book, so it's not.
Okay.
It's not in the cookbook.
Some things will stay on the internet.
Yes, that's right. And another famous dish that appears in the films is the quiche de cabinet, which Bond makes in A View to a Kill, which I recreated, and I was quite proud of my effort. It looked pretty much like what Bond serves up. But I did notice. But this is the other thing. You sort of make these things, and you notice, oh, actually, something's not quite right in the film. Because I noticed that when James Bond pulls out the quiche from the oven, it's out of its oven dish. It's out of the base. It's as if it's been taken out of the oven dish and ready for serving. It's so I mean, it's presumably just a slight error in the way the props were made. But if Bond did cook that, then he took it out of the tin, the quiche tin, and then popped it back in the oven. Possibly he did, to keep it warm. Possibly possibly Stacey was away feeding the cat, so he couldn't serve it straight away. So he just put it back in the oven to keep warm. But I don't know. It was, but the things you notice. And this is the other thing about these.
The more you notice, the more you see.
Yes, that's right. Yes, yeah.
I was in California myself recently, and so I couldn't resist making the quiche in California. And again, following the very clear recipe from your book.
That's good. Yes. So well, I'm glad. Yeah, I mean, to bring, just like the food brings more enjoyment to and appreciation of the novels, it also enhances the experience of watching films as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, we do see food in the background quite a bit. I think I'm noticing it in the Roger Moore films. I was watching For Your Eyes Only recently, and there's a nice little business dinner that he has with Christoph.
Yeah,
Christatos.
Yes, with Christatos. Yes, we don't really see a lot of the food in detail, so it's try to read, which presents difficulty with recreating food because it's mentioned and you vaguely see plates, but it's just happening too quickly, and the camera doesn't pan down to the dish enough really to be able to get a absolutely clear idea of what something looks like. But the food mentioned in that Bond has in that meal in Corfu, I've recreated most of the dishes there. So and they're in the new cookbook. So yeah, so it's there's plenty, and it's all brought up to date as well. in No Time to Die, we see Bond, or at least it's implied that Bond cooks prepares some pancakes for Mathilde.
Yeah.
And so that's the second time we know that the second time Bond cooks in the films, which I think is quite nice. I did think that the filmmakers missed a trick there because it's breakfast, and what should Bond be making for breakfast? Well, scrambled eggs.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the script writers, we know they go back to Fleming because that film is full of references to You Only Live Twice and other things. And I thought, well, it wouldn't have taken much just to add that little sort of nugget, really, and just have mixed scrambled eggs. That would have been a nice touch. But the pancakes worked as well, and they gave me something else to cook. So
are they pancakes? Are they crepes? Are they?
Well, they're crepes. Well, they're crepes, but I mean, I'm happy calling them pancakes as well. I think we think of there's American style pancakes, and then it's. I think there was a debate on Pancake Day recently on social media about that we shouldn't be calling grapes pancakes. They're crepes, but I've always called them pancakes. So
fair enough. I wasn't sure if crepe is a type of pancake. I'm on the edge of my ignorance here.
I think they're a type of pancakes. I mean, they're in. Yes, I mean and in the certainly in the historical cookbooks, the English language ones, they're pancakes. So yes, but the difference is this is the like the quiche, you sort of think, well, it's not quite right because the American style pancake that's typically a breakfast item, but the French pancake, the crepe, isn't a breakfast item, and in France they'd never consider eating crepes for breakfast. So it's a bit of an odd choice in a way.
Perhaps this is why Mathilde is like Pamal.
Yeah, well, that's right. Perhaps she's a little bit. Perhaps yes, she's cheating them just for politeness' sake. But it's not. She realises it's not quite the done thing. I don't know, but it's. But yes, it's. Yes, but anyway, it's nice detail. It's good to see a bit of food. Unfortunately, we don't. Some of the food items in No Time to Die was left on the cutting room floor. It seems. Because in Jamaica we see Bond's house, which is itself quite a rarity, seeing where he lives. But a kitchen was prepared on for that set. There was the kitchen was part of the set, but we don't really see it very much in the film. We know we see Bond walking back with his two red snappers, and so but he doesn't actually cook it. And I mean, you can see it you can find behind the scenes videos on things like YouTube. But there's one about of the construction of his Jamaican house, and we see the kitchen in a little bit more detail. And on there's looks like a kitchen dresser. There's a few condiments and sauces and spreads. There's as far as I can see, there's a jar of Marmite, and which is a yeast. Anyone who's not familiar with Marmite, it's a yeast spread, which and the slogan that goes with it with Marmite is that you either love it or you hate it, and it's a thing that divides. At least in British culture, it's things that divides a nation. And I've never been a Marmite fan, but one of my brothers is a Marmite fan. There's always a source of tension there. But so I suppose, like the film, it with No Time to Die polarized opinion pretty much. And, so it is almost deliberately placed. It's a Marmite film, and Bond has Marmite. So
this could be the headline of this podcast: Does Bond love Marmite?
Yes, that's right. There's also a bottle of HP sauce, so a brown sauce that in Britain it's poured liberally over, usually over cooked breakfast, sausages and things like that, or in bacon sandwiches.
I have had some earlier today in a bacon sandwich.
Right, great. Well, that's what. You're probably following in Bond's footsteps. So there's a spotted here. So there's this bottle of brown sauce or HP sauce, and most Bond like sauce, condiment. you can imagine in a way. But yeah, there it is. I haven't written about it on my blog yet, but I'll put it on there eventually.
And this is a preview for your blog.
Yes,
and I think for American listeners, the HP sauce is very similar to steak A1 sauce. But your attention to detail is phenomenal. I mean, you've even done a piece on Moneypenny's fridge when she briefly opens the fridge door, Inspector.
Oh yes, yeah, yes. I mean, we see a lot of kitchens actually in the Bond films, kitchens and toilets or bathrooms. There's anyway, I won't go into that one aspect of that, but yes, kitchens. We see a lot of kitchens. And
the toilets of Bond we'll save for later.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, that's a different blog. I think. So we see, we see Moneypenny's kitchen briefly, and was a Spectre. Yes, you're right. You mentioned that. Yeah, in Spectre we see Moneypenny's kitchen, and she opens, and there's a variety of things. Again, trying to identify a lot of these things. It's quite difficult, and at least I don't have the HD DVDs or anything, but I try my best. But yeah, there's a variety of things, and like Hellmann's mayonnaise. Hellmann's mayonnaise is a very in Britain it's probably the most popular brand of mayonnaise, and there's a bottle in her fridge. We see. I've got a bit of a series on the blog about different people's fridges and kitchens rather, and so the first time we see James Bond's kitchen is in Live and Let Die, and of course that was really a state of the art kitchen, with a coffee maker that looked very impressive, and although perhaps I don't think Em was particularly impressed by the coffee that he was served.
No, I think he says, "Is that all it does?"
Yes. But it's very shiny. It's got copper pans, which Ian Fleming would have been happy with. He always recommended copper pans for scrambled eggs, and I think there's even a fondue set there. There's a waffle maker. There seems to be a waffle maker. It's either a waffle maker or a toasted sandwich maker. I like to think it's a waffle maker because that's a little bit more Bondian. So yeah, there's. But again, these are gadgets that would have been pretty exciting. But I mean, of course, you don't really see them unless you look carefully. We see, of course, Margaret Thatcher's kitchen in Furious Only, or at least an imagined a kitchen of Margaret Thatcher. And so it was fun to look at these things and see what was in there.
And I remember you said this was very similar to the actual kitchen of Margaret Thatcher, and it was photographed for some publicity.
Oh yes, yeah, that's right. Yes, of course, she very much portrayed herself as very much portrayed herself as a housewife, and so it was important for her to be, and on the housewife's side, and it was very important for her to be seen, be taking care of the house and providing for her family, and so yeah, there were I think Margaret Thatcher must have had several photo shoots in her kitchen, and yes, and it did. I've seen images that do bear a striking resemblance to the kitchen that was shown in Furious Only. Possibly I used them as reference shots. I don't know, but yeah. So it's so it may well be quite an accurate reconstruction of the real Margaret Thatcher's kitchen. And
Bill, we see him very briefly trying to steal a sprout.
Yes, that's right. Yes, something like that. Yes. Yes, of course, that sort of comic moment at the end of the film, which is yes.
And we even see Bond shopping for food in that film as well, so it's quite a food-heavy one.
Oh yes, it is. Yes, in the Greek market, and yes, and he takes has a fig, and shares a fig. I think that's what it looks like to me with Lena, and shops for provisions for the boat. So it's very food heavy. I like that film instantly, but I said I'm an archaeologist, and I like that film because there's some archaeology in that film.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Sir Timothy Havelock is an archaeologist, marine archaeologist, so I can relate to his work quite well, and I have looked at some of the detail of the archaeology, because of course Melina James dive into the water and swing around the ruins of a temple, a classical temple. And yeah, it's and that was that. I mean, again, the designers did their homework, and it's based on actual archaeological sites. So it's
wow.
so yeah. So it's, I like that detail.
That is something I'd wondered about, how accurate all that underwater archaeology was.
Well, I mean, it looked a little bit. I mean, yeah. So I think it looks a little bit too clean and tidy. I mean, it's but yeah. As I mean, I don't expect it to be entirely accurate, but it looks, they've, at least they've tried. It's
yeah. The world of Bond is always a bit cleaner, a bit nicer, a bit.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, exactly.
Except when it's horrifying, but
yes. That's it.
And I think the food is a wonderful, wonderful insight into it. So thank you very much for discussing this with me. Your book, License to Cook, your blog, James Bond Food, and your new book coming out.
Yes, which is called Double O Dining, and that should be published by Bear Manor Media. Fingers crossed in May. And I bet I'm sure I'll put something up on my website with all the details when they're available.
Fantastic. And I'll put a link to your website and to the book that's already out in the show notes to this podcast. Thank you very, very much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
And yes, well, thank you for having me. And it's been absolutely wonderful talking to you.
Thank you.